Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on today's webinar as we look at how we at Ultimate Finance have been supporting our Charity of the Year, the MND Association. And to find out more and raise awareness of motor neuron disease, my name is Joe Hill. I'll be your host for today. I'm Internal Communications Manager here at Ultimate Finance, and it's my pleasure to oversee all of our charity-focused initiatives across the business with the support of our team of charity champions. First off, a little bit about us, Ultimate Finance. We are a UK asset-based lender, part of the Tavistock Group, and we're very much committed to being a responsible business. And if you head to our website, you'll be able to read our Responsible Business Report, which outlines our approach to ESG. And a key part of that is our wide range of charitable initiatives. And so through established volunteering, fundraising and donation initiatives, we're proud to have been able to support a wide range of causes and charities over the years. For 2024, though, we wanted to evolve our charity approach and partner with a single charity for a prolonged period of time to make a sizable difference. We put the question to our employees who elected the MND Association as our Charity of the Year. And so far, we're delighted to have raised almost £12,000 for the MNDA, and there's more to come. As we've said, our partnership with the MNDA brought with it that desire to evolve what we were doing from a charity perspective. And so our flagship fundraising initiative for the MNDA so far has been the Ultimate Three Peaks Challenge. With the support of a mountain and outdoor expedition specialist, Raw Adventures, our goal was to get 3 groups of Ultimate Finance employees to the summits of the 3 highest peaks in the UK on the same day at the same time. Slightly ambitious, but I'm pleased to say that on the 10th of September, we did exactly what we set out to do, with over 40 Ultimate Finance employees reaching the summits of Ben Nevis, Scafell Pike and Snowdon. I think it's fair to say the weather wasn't quite on our side. Relentless rain, snow and winds of over 50 miles an hour provided the most challenging of conditions, but thankfully everyone made it up and down the mountain safely. And as I say, we were absolutely delighted to raise almost £12,000 for the MNDA in support of the incredible work that they do. Which brings us to today's webinar and the next stage of our partnership with the MND Association. Now, the objective of today's webinar is solely to raise awareness and find out more about motor neuron disease itself and the real-world impact on the families and those suffering with it. And we'll also be hearing about how funds that are raised for the MNDA are deployed across the charity. Now, at this point, I'm delighted to introduce Liz Ellis. Not only is Liz one of our valued Ultimate Finance clients, she's also a trustee of the MNDA and someone who has first-hand experience of caring for someone with MND. Liz, welcome. Great to have you with us. If you're happy to, would you be able to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your connection with Ultimate Finance?
Okay. My sort of introduction to MND started many years ago, unfortunately, and my uncle had MND. He was in his 70s. We all thought it was an older person's illness at that point, so we didn't really think anything about it for a long time. Then in 2018, my son was diagnosed with motor neurone disease, which was a tremendous shock to all of us. He had a very rapid progression of the illness, and it was all of the things that everybody experiences with MND. There's the shock, there's the horror, there's the trying to come to terms with it, there's keeping up with every stage of the illness if you have a rapid progression, and so on and so forth. And my daughter got in touch with a gentleman called Peter Scott Morgan to see if he could help us. And Peter is very well known in the world of, or was well known in the world of technology. He also had motor neurone disease and his onset was rapid. He took the view that at that point in time, medicine couldn't help him. So he was a scientist and he turned to technology, which was great because he helped us along the way. And he was instrumental in getting my son tracheostomy back in 2019, which enabled Stephen, my son, to live until early this year. And at that time, Peter himself was about to undergo surgery. So I think that was an amazing thing for him to do. And then later along the line, it was Peter who nominated me to become a trustee of the Motor Neurone Disease Association, which hadn't crossed my mind at all. And I was successful. So, you know, that got me into a lot of areas where I could gain knowledge that perhaps I didn't have access to before, around the world of treatments, technology, research, many different aspects, and also able to influence the policy of the association in terms of where they directed the research, what was needed, because our experience was telling me very much about the immediate needs of the illness and the long-term needs. I can't, experience is everything, you know, you can't, particularly with this illness, you cannot understand it unless you've had some element of experience. Mm-hmm. And we really did have that experience. It's been, or was, it's a horrendous illness. It's very, very difficult. And all I want to do now is to help other people to use that experience that I gained, Stephen's legacy for what he wanted to do, and to move forward. Now, I also have a business, and that's how I actually connected to Ultimate Finance. And it was through my relationship manager, Jane, who we met. She likes to meet all the clients, and so we talked and we shared experience. And it's from that connection that Jane promoted, I think, my involvement in motor neurone disease. Joe, I don't know if that answers your first question or answers all your questions.
No, it does, absolutely, Liz. Yeah, and you know, we're very privileged to have you with us. You know, not only as a client, but also as in your role as a trustee of the MNDA. And so you talked briefly about your son Stephen then, and as you say, Stephen was diagnosed with MND back in 2018. And in the conversations we've had, Liz, you know, talking about that journey, you highlighted particular Stephen's mindset when he received his diagnosis, that sort of positive mindset that he took to try and focus on the positive things that in his life rather than what he'd lost. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, and again, it's part of the journey, I think. Before Stephen was diagnosed, when he was having tests to see what the problem was, he actually said to me, if it's MND, I'm on the plane to Switzerland. So that's how he felt at that time. Gosh. And of course, he was diagnosed, and he decided, like Peter, that he was going to look at using technology while he waited for, you know, opportunities that might come on board through research, etc. And after a while, he kind of, you're permanently making adjustments with this illness. And he reached the mindset where he thought, I'm not going to focus on what I've lost. I'm going to focus on what I have now. And from that point on, that's what he did. And with the aid of technology, he was able to communicate. He was able to, he at that point couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't eat, couldn't swallow. But he still focused on that, focused on communicating with his carers around him, engaging in their lives, supporting me as he always had done. And I'm very proud of what Stephen achieved. I'm very proud of the fact that there was no feeling sorry for himself. And of course, that helped me cope as well. Because if I'd had to cope with distressed 24 hours a day, then I don't know how long I would have coped. I'm not saying he didn't have setbacks. Who wouldn't? But his positivity shone through, and he changed a lot of attitudes about the illness, because one of the things, I think one of the judgment is about quality of life. Okay, Stephen had a kind of mindset that was academic, and he liked to read and he liked to watch programs about ancient civilization, and that was his special interest, so he was able to focus on that. But I think my message is if it's at all possible to get to that point where you can focus on what you have, and that can be your family, the love around you, you can still think, you can still feel, you can still make a contribution, then it's about finding out what is your goal, what is your special interest in life, and trying to focus on that. Not easy. None of it is easy. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that it's possible for everybody to do that. But for me and for Stephen, it was the only way through that we could see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wow, just, yeah, what an amazing mindset to take, and such, such courage as well. I suppose, Liz, that leads us on to something else that we've talked about. And, there's a lot of emphasis on the work that goes into the research and development side of MND. And I think we're going to touch on that later. But for you, a big thing, and one of your passions as a trustee, is the here and now. And, from your firsthand experience, people who are living with MND in the here and now, they have needs that are very much immediate. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that, as in you've talked about Stephen, but what are things that people living with MND can benefit from immediately?
Well, I'm a member of a number of groups of people who are either carers for people with MND or have MND. So I'm very much in tune with their needs, basically, because that's what the groups are for. And it seems to me that everything that crops up around those needs is something that we actually went through. And the needs change, and they can be simple things that are needed, good quality of care, understanding, research that is ongoing, which again, I was lucky enough to be on a research group that looked at what do people want now, what should researchers be looking at. The cure, obviously, that is always there on the horizon, but what can we do now to help people? And a lot of things have come out of that. There are things like secretion management, which is a big thing, swallowing, coughing, cough assist, many things, adaptations in the home, things that are needed, getting the right wheelchair, getting the right, voice banking is an amazing thing that the association have been involved in for quite some time. And I'd just like to touch on that, if I may. I miss Stephen's voice. When you don't realise how much a voice is the essence of the person, and to lose it is a big struggle. It affects most of the people on my network now. When that happens to them, it's quite devastating for them and for the people around them. And that's something that I think that the MND Association has excelled at. They've managed to get access to voice banking that's done speedily, because people with MND don't always have time. Some people do. It depends. They have been amazing with that kind of help and research. Also, access to the benefits, continuing healthcare. Again, the association leads on that. There's several groups, again, I'm involved in those, to help people who are in shock, who can't think, to help them through that minefield of how do you access what you need to survive, because it can affect you. You can't work, your family maybe have to give up the work, etc., etc. And it is important. That quality of life I keep going back to, making the most of what you have. And I do think the association does an amazing job with the work that it does on the needs of people now. And there is a big focus on the here and now. What can we do? How can we help people now who are suffering from this devastating illness?
Absolutely. Yeah. So important. And as well, we touched on before, those are those needs in the here and now, but also there are those, the research and development is a big part of what the charity does as well. And particularly, we've talked about the research of regeneration of motor neurons and how significant that could be in terms of the impact it might have for people living with the disease. Tell us a bit more about that, Liz, what that research and that search for a cure looks like as well from your perspective within the MNDA.
Well, I talked about regeneration of motor neurons quite a lot. In my, I suppose, naivety, I thought it was the question of kind of growing them and transplanting them. It's a very, very complicated thing. And what I now understand is that the work is focused on creating, building neurons, in the labs, etc., etc. But it's very complicated because, as it was explained to me, a motor neuron could be a yard long because it's got to get from, say, your spinal cord to your foot, for example, or I guess to your arm, and they grow very, very slowly. So, too slow for it to be of any real benefit. So what they're looking at the moment, as I understand it, and I'm not a scientist, so forgive me, scientists, if I get this wrong, but in my lay terms, what they're trying to do is looking at ways of creating a neuron, put it as close as they can to the muscle that they want to move, and then with technology, create a signal to the spinal cord or the brain to allow that muscle to move. And who knows, they may, as they go along with that journey, find a way of allowing or getting the neurons to grow more quickly. But again, as it was put to me, they're not the neurons we were born with, and they may not know which direction to grow in. But that work is still happening. There is still a focus on that for the longer term. And other things like ways of keeping neurons healthy, what destroys them. So every stage of this illness, through the association and through the work that they fund, at every single stage there is something happening. And that's a message I want to leave with people. You just never know what can be done to help.
Yeah, fantastic. Liz, thank you so much for joining us and for your incredibly unique insight. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and to talk to you and to find out just so much more about the disease and the charity. And at this point, that leads me on nicely to our next guest, and I'm delighted to welcome Richard Parris from the MND Association. So Richard is the Corporate Partnerships Development Manager at the MND Association. And in his role, Richard works with corporate partners to help fundraise, raise awareness, and ultimately create lasting partnerships that support the MNDA's vision of a world free from MND. Richard, welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Joe, for having me. So this is always the best part of my job, where I get to meet the people that are ultimately funding our work, and in today's case, obviously get to meet one of our trustees as well, we'd met previously, but also, I guess, hearing real world stories of families touched by MND, because it just makes my job so much more motivating. Every morning I get up and hoping that we're making a real impact to the lives of people obviously affected by this devastating disease. I think I'd want to start just by sort of doing a real quick recap. So obviously you heard from Liz, MND is a devastating disease, often very rapidly progressing. For most people, about a third of people will die within a year of diagnosis and about half within 2 years. So it is very rapidly progressing. As you heard from Liz, it attacks the nerves that control your movement, so your motor neurons. So when my hand is moving here, obviously the message from my brain down my spinal cord along the motor neuron that makes my hand move. As those motor neurons die, effectively, it's like cutting off those signals, so you lose the use of those limbs. Ultimately, what that leads to is people being locked in that failing body, sort of, unable to walk, to talk, which is another big aspect, and then to sort of sadly swallow and sort of ultimately sort of breathe. So it affects about 5,000 adults at any one time in the UK. And I guess the worst bit for me is the fact that, today, 6 people will sit in a hospital clinic somewhere in the UK and get that diagnosis that they have MND, and sadly a further 6 will also die today from the disease. So, what do we do as the MND Association to obviously give hope and to support those that are living with the MND today? And I guess, what are we doing on the research side of things that hopefully this may change the outlook for people in the future? So with MND being such a complicated disease, most people will be looked after by a neurologist. So once you've received, you get your diagnosis from a neurologist. Over the time, you will need to see a whole range of specialists, from your neurologist, that's the primary person looking after your care, to occupational health, respiratory nurses to help as your breathing becomes more difficult, speech and language therapists to help you as sometimes your jaw muscles and throat muscles become weaker. You need to be able to keep the strength there to be able to keep your voice for as long as possible. So a whole plethora of people that you will need to see. Now, for anyone that's fully able that has to go to a hospital clinic, you can know the frustrations of getting to the hospital, parking your car, finding the clinic, sitting in a waiting room, getting your appointment. Imagine, if you will, having to go to 20 different clinics to see all those different individuals, often in different locations. The impact to somebody living with MND of having to do that would be dramatic, not just physically, mentally, and their quality of life as well. So the MND care centres, of which we've got a network of 22, soon to be 23, provide what we call multidisciplinary care. So we have an MND care coordinator, and that person's job is to coordinate that care across those range of specialists, so that ideally someone with MND can go to an MND care centre and see everybody they need to see in that one appointment, and that all of those are talking and communicating with each other, hopefully therefore improving the access and the care that someone living with MND ultimately receives. So that first and foremost is one of the most important things that we do within the care side of things. But then, as you can probably imagine, and sadly, we still live in what is a bit of a postcode lottery. So every NHS service offers slightly differing levels of care and what you may or may not get access to. People with MND do not have time to wait. If you're unfortunate enough to have a very rapidly progressing form of MND, waiting for the right wheelchair, waiting to be able to see the specialist, getting the referral, and then getting the right wheelchair can be a long, drawn-out process. Simple little things like a riser recliner, for example. So for those of you who don't know, you can have a device fitted to your wheelchair that will raise you up so you're almost at eye height. Imagine, if you will, having to communicate for the rest of your time from a seated position, having to look up at the people you're talking with. A riser recliner can help people come up, maintain eye contact, and help keep that personal connection that is so important for people as they lose the ability to maybe communicate and to interact physically with the world. Things like that, though, aren't classed by the NHS as being vital to mobility. Therefore, things like that are not funded. But they have such a big impact to people's quality of life. And very sadly, a lot of people with MND will also have to give up work at some point, because obviously the disease sort of kicks in. People won't be able to be as mobile. They won't be able to communicate. They'll often have to give up work. It's very often as well the case that a partner may have to take reduced hours. I mean, Liz spoke there about the level of care and stuff that she had to provide to her son. So that also can have a real impact on families' finances. We done a study not that long ago that at the same time of all this additional financial impact that people are going through, it costs on average the average family about £14,500 just to live with MND, for all the extra bits and bobs that you need to try to give you the right level of support. So, for me, that's one of the things that obviously is one of the worst aspects. You're living with a terminal condition, coming to terms with that, and at the same time having to battle financial stability and the impact that then has on the person living with MND and the wider family. Really does impact that quality of life. So we have a range of support grants that provide a level of care to people with MND to make sure that where possible they have access to the right support they need, and more importantly, when they need it. Those grants can be used for things like home adaptations. It may be a case of, moving a bedroom downstairs, fitting a stair lift, making the home more accessible, a simple wheelchair ramp to a back garden to allow someone to still experience the outside and to be able to get outside at home. All these little small things have such a massive impact to a person's quality of life, and our support grants go a long way to helping people achieve this. There's always more that we'd love to be able to do, but all of that work fundamentally is funded by people like yourselves that contribute to the cause. We don't get any government funding. Everything we do comes from families like Liz that have been affected by MND that choose to go on to fundraise for us. People like yourselves that have got that connection to MND through a colleague at work that go on to decide to either make us their charity of the year and support us. So, internally grateful for that. And, when we talk about you guys joining the fight against MND, you really are, because, your fundraising has a direct impact on what we are able to deliver to those people living with MND here and now. Beyond that, and Liz touched on this briefly, we have an MND Connect helpline. So that's there to provide people with a friendly voice to help them navigate the incredibly complicated world out there in terms of getting the access to support that they need, to give them a friendly ear, people that they can phone and talk to when anything is kind of concerning them, and more importantly, help signpost them to all the relevant services to make that journey. I mean, I've been fortunate enough really to never have to rely on the benefit system. I hope that continues. But I've had friends that have had, and I know how complicated that can be for anybody to navigate. Imagine, if you will, not being able to speak on the telephone, to hold a pen, or to be able to look something up online, and having to try and find that support. And again, our campaigns team fights quite hard there. Very recently, we've been able to get we had a campaign called the Scrap 6 Months campaign. So with someone with MND was able to register for benefits to get a level of support. Up until very recently, every 6 months they would have had to basically reapply, which just seemed ridiculous. So thanks in large part to our campaign team and our network of volunteers that helped with that, we're very delighted to say that that's now been removed for certainly for people living with MND. I want to go over voice banking again, just because, as Liz touched on it, I feel it's such a huge factor in people's quality of life. I'm working more and more with young families affected by MND, families with young children. And for me, I guess one of the emotional things that always hits me, so I have to always be careful when I start talking about this, because it never fails to have an impact. It's, as a dad myself, the ability to still read my kids a bedtime story, and for kids to still read and recognize the voice that may be coming through a technology device as still sounding like dad, is so important to people living with MND. Most people identify with their voice. So most of you will be familiar with what Stephen Hawking used as an earlier adopter of eye gaze technology. He had a robotic synthesized voice that was available at that time to be able to communicate. Nowadays, basically we can get a voice that in most cases, will sound a good sort of 95% plus like the individual beforehand. So that identity is still there. A few years ago, that involved a microphone, repeating phrase after phrase, quite tiresome. So for people with MND, very difficult. But as Liz mentioned, now we've got that down to read a simple book and you get that voice. So it's been simplified hugely, even coping with things like regional accents, you know, and sometimes if you get to somebody a bit too late where their voice is already weakened and you can't capture a true representation, if they've got a sibling that sounds similar, we can use parts of their voice to kind of repair what is left and be able to give a fairly good representation of what someone's voice would sound like. So, you know, that piece of technology and those advancements just have such a huge impact to people's quality of life. And again, all of that came from our technology think tank, companies looking at how they could help support that process, and ultimately that work being funded by people like yourselves. So you can give yourselves a round of applause for when you were walking up that mountain in the foggy rain and achieving what you did, knowing that that's helped fund and support that work. Nowadays, we can give someone an iPad with a bit of software called Predictable, costs just around 500 quid to give someone back that ability to communicate through that device. A bake sale, walking up a mountain, £12,000, that's 24 families effectively, provided with one of those those communication aids. So yeah, it really is an important area of our work. I guess moving on from care, it's really about how do we improve the outlook for people further down the line through research. Right now, we've got about £20.7 million as of December last year invested in around 109 research projects. Sounds like a lot of money, but in the world of medical research, obviously it's not. We would obviously love to be putting more in there. More money means more research that we can do. And it's not all, as Liz rightly pointed out, we've got a long way to go. At the moment, for example, there's not a single diagnostic test for MND. A diagnosis of MND can be really difficult. It comes through ruling out all of the other possible things. So you'll probably go through, looking at Parkinson's and other diseases before ultimately you're left with the diagnosis of MND. That can be really frustrating for families. Imagine, if you will, you're unlucky to have a very rapidly progressing type of disease. If you're one of the third that will die within sort of 12 months of diagnosis, taking 10 months to get that diagnosis doesn't leave you a lot of time to build those family memories and build plans, further down the line. So anything that we can do to enhance that would be, greatly received. But again, like Liz, I'm not a scientist, so I can't go into huge technical details. But one of the things that fascinated me was about 10% of cases are what they call familial. So there's a genetic cause. There's a defect in a gene that ultimately causes your motor neurone disease, and about 10% of cases fall into that category. Once you know that, if you can understand what's going wrong in that gene defect, what's the mechanics that ultimately cause the motor neurone disease to die, you can then looking at drugs that might combat that particular genetic form of the disease. However, we also know that just because you've got that gene doesn't necessarily mean that you'll go on to develop MND. So there's a range of sort of lifestyle choices and environmental factors, and you need a fair few of those in order for potentially for MND to obviously develop in your cells. So there was a big worldwide study called Project Mind that was taking samples of people with MND from around the world and looking at all of those environmental and lifestyle choices and trying to find those little tiny minute links that might be that cause the disease to go on and develop. At the same time, I was fascinated to know that nowadays they have the technology, and again, do not hold me to this, I am not a scientist, but basically they can take a skin cell from someone living with MND. By introducing chemicals to that, you can turn that skin cell back into a stem cell. And then by introducing a further set of chemicals to that stem cell, you can have it develop into a motor neuron that has that particular genetic defect, which means you can study it in a petri dish in a lab. So that was a huge kind of breakthrough, and that one I always sort of really sort of blew my mind in terms of, you know, where we're at in terms of what we're able to do.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't that long ago that we only really knew about one of those genes that caused MND, ironically named SOD1. Now, you know, we're 20 plus and counting in terms of understanding the different genetics and their defects that cause MND. And again, none of that would be possible without the funding of people like yourselves. So it's hugely vital. As Liz said, ultimately, it will improve our understanding of the disease. Hopefully it will lead to treatments to different aspects of the disease. And obviously our long-time goal and our vision is that world free from MND, but it will be a staged approach at trying to tackle this. And the more money that we have through our fundraising initiatives, the more we can do in that space. So that's pretty much it. I hope, I mean, I've given you quite a big sort of lot to sort of digest there and sort of take in, but I hope it gives you a feeling of just how important our work is on the care side, very much for looking after people living with MND now and to providing a better future for people with MND in the future, and hopefully getting to a point where nobody has to sit in that clinic, or fewer people do, and hear that you have MND and there's no treatments available to you. So thank you for listening. I'd like to say, you know, for anyone listening, if you would like to get involved, I know obviously Joe and the team at Ultimate Finance are doing all sorts of fundraising activities. I know you've got a prize draw coming up in Christmas that's going to be released soon. So just think, you know, when you're buying those tickets, the money that you're buying those tickets with will be going to fund, you know, one of those aspects of our care or our research. And who knows, at the end of the day, you may just get a nice prize at the end of it, as well as that feeling of really helping a group of people living with what is probably, you know, in my mind, one of the worst diseases that faces humans across the world. So thank you. Back to you, Joe.
Richard, thank you so much. Just such an amazing insight, and you know, to hear the huge scope of work that the charity is doing, and all those different ways that the funds are deployed to support people is just fascinating. Honestly, in my conversations with the two of you in preparation for this, I could honestly speak to you all day, because it's so interesting, and there is so much, you know, wisdom and expertise between the two of you in terms of the amazing work you're both doing. So thank you, and thank you for joining us. As Richard did say, we, here at Ultimate Finance, yes, we're partnering with the MNDA. We have a Christmas prize draw coming up, which we'll be sharing details of very soon on our website and across our social channels. That will be launching on the 15th of November. But before we head off, we have had a couple of questions come in. So people have been using the Q&A function to submit their questions. Thank you. And if anybody does have any, please do drop them in there. But the first question that we've had in, Liz and Richard, is around the symptoms of MND. And, you know, what are those initial symptoms of motor neuron disease? So would one of you care to share something on that?
Yes, maybe I can't, because I've experienced it. Initially, it's small things, like you might find you dragging your foot. It's called foot drop, and that gets weaker. Other symptoms might be affecting your voice and slurring your words. So, you know, people might think you've had a few drinks and you haven't. Difficulty with swallowing. Kind of what they call fasciculations, which kind of ripples through your body, and they're things that you probably would take no notice of. You would just think, oh, you know, I don't know what that's about, but it'll pass. But eventually, that you get more and more of those types of symptoms, which gets you hopefully to see a neurologist. As Richard said, you know, sometimes it can take an awful long time for that to happen, and you've lost all that valuable time. So being aware of those early symptoms, I believe, is important, and insisting on getting some form of diagnosis at that early stage as well. You know, getting kind of dropping things and your hands start to go. Lots of little subtle signals that awareness, the awareness of all of that is vitally important. Richard, you want to add to that, or?
No, I think you've hit the three big ones from me that I hear most common is a lack of grip strength. Whether that's, I had one gentleman that he diagnosed himself. He used to play squash a lot, and he just noticed that he just couldn't quite hold the racket as strongly as he could, and that was his first symptom. The drinking one you mentioned there, Liz, is again, people with MND have a very good sense of humour, which I never ceases to amaze me, despite what they're living with, and I'll often get that for people that have got progressive bulbar palsy. It might be the one that starts in around this sort of area. Maybe, I think someone comically said, the wife got a phone call and said, I think your husband's been drinking, he's starting to slur his words at work, and it was quite early in the day, so probably shouldn't have been having a drink. But that for them was that first sort of start of symptoms that people were picking up, that there was a slight slur in the speech, and that led obviously to that later diagnosis. And then the other big one, obviously the drop foot side of things, just tripping over more than usual. For any of you that have seen Theory of Everything with Eddie Redmayne, that looks at obviously Stephen Hawking and his journey with MND, that does a reasonable job of highlighting those areas where it scenes where him struggling to hold a pencil or tripping over sort of outside. These are all common indicators of potentially that, but it's really important to point out as well, knowing what I do, I've had issues where I've tripped over my own feet, and my first thought was instantly to, oh my goodness, and there are many other diseases and things that could cause any number of those symptoms, and that's partly what also makes a diagnosis of MND difficultly. But as Liz says, important not to ignore those kind of things, because those are very early indicators of potentially something like motor neuron disease.
Gosh.
But don't panic if anyone has a slight issue in any of those areas. Go see a doctor.
Thank you both. I'm conscious of time, but we've had one more question in, which, the same question from a couple of people actually, so we'll just address that one before we wrap things up. And it's around the split between male and female in terms of diagnosis. Is MND more prolific in men or women, or is it a fairly equal split?
It's more males, and I don't think they have an answer to why that is, but clearly they're going to look at it. But I don't know what the margin is, Richard, you may. I think it appears to me to be becoming more approaching equal, whereas it was more predominantly males. Statistics,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good question, and one that helps me address a couple of there. So Liz alluded to this as well at the beginning. Not that long ago, this was seen as an old person's disease. People in their 70s got MND, nobody else. Last week I went to film with a young lady who was diagnosed at 25. So MND truly does affect people from every walk of life, from every community, and at any age. It is far more likely in people that are 50 plus. There are more people in that age bracket for sure. And as Liz alluded, it's close to, it favours men, maybe 51, 52%. I don't know the exact figure, but there are slightly more men than diagnosed than women. But for me, it's about perception. It's a lot of work has gone into raising the awareness of MND over the last few years, and for people to understand that MND is a disease that affects every person at every stage of their life and from every community. Nobody's immune from MND. It does impact all of us, or potentially, rather, is a better way of saying that. So I guess just to learn from that, really, the work that we're doing here is supporting people as young as in their 20s right up to people in the latter stage of, and all of those go through different troubles and different traumas of living with MND and require different levels of support and care as well. So So hopefully that's helped address those myths, if you like, in terms of it being an old disease that affects more men. It very much affects everybody from all communities.
So I wonder if it's about awareness. I mean, as you get older, then your neurons do slowly die. That's just part of aging. And I think maybe there were misdiagnoses years ago. It may be that, you know, we tend to think that it's affecting more young people now, but maybe it's always been that way, but it hasn't been correctly diagnosed. And it's, you know, this kind of program that we're doing, not program, but, you know, this conversation helps to raise the awareness of these things. And it's important not to try not to, this is a criticism, this is, you know, really, I shouldn't make this point because we did it, we panicked. It's so important not to panic, just to try and reach out, you know, stay calm. Easier said than done. We didn't manage to do that initially, but you do grow to do those things.
Brilliant. What an apt piece of advice to finish on, Liz. Liz and Richard, thank you both so much for joining us and for your valuable insights in terms of today. As we said at the beginning, the objective was very much to try and raise awareness of MND for us internally and for everyone watching, to try and find out a bit more about this disease. And I think that's absolutely been what you've done. So thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Glad to be here. So best part of our job. And as I said, if you never need any more information or you want to do another one of these or another deeper, you know, we're always welcome to. We'd love to come and talk to you guys. So yeah, just keep us posted. We'll do as many of these as you need, just to help raising awareness of MND and ultimately funds to help us support those families living with it. Happy to do what we can to help in that regard.
Thank you.
Can I just say very quickly that I'm not speaking as a trustee. I'm speaking now as somebody whose son had MND, who died because of the MND. I will do anything to help any individual that I can, as I do in many of the groups that I'm a part of. Anybody, I'm happy for anybody to contact me with any kind of question or request for help.
That's fantastic. Thank you both so much. And I'm sure what we will do is we will follow up for everyone who's attended this webinar with details of the recording, and if you're both happy with contact details for people who might want to get in touch to find out more.
Just going to highlight, Joe, I don't know if you spotted, but Jane has her hand up. I don't know whether she has a question that she wants to ask, but I just wanted to acknowledge it. She's had her hand up for a little while, so I don't know whether we could.
If I think Jane did put a question in the Q&A, so whether we've addressed that or not, I'm not sure, Jane. But I know Jane knows Liz very well, so I'm sure we can pick that up afterwards if needs be. But again, just conscious of time, and especially your valuable time, Liz and Richard. So again, just want to take this final opportunity to thank you very much for joining us today, and to thank everyone who's attended this webinar. We hope that you found it interesting. You found it, found out more about MND and the work of the MND Association. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have a good day all. Thanks for the privilege coming to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.